following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
We are back. Degraw's Yankees. I'm Ralph Tycho with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, and I have the privilege, as I do weekly, of introducing the host of the show, Jack Degraw. Hello, Jack.
How you doing, Ralph?
I'm doing pretty well. You're enjoying a Yankee spring training, and I want to hear about it. What's going on in Yankeeville?
Well, I've had a great time. I've been to 6 games already, and so that's been a lot of fun, and I've been able to get in kind of cheap, so that's even more fun. If there's any bad news, Luis Severino, they shut him down for a couple weeks because he's having trouble with his shoulder. I was watching him warm up in the bullpen, and he threw maybe 6-7 pitches, and they shut him down, and they did an MRI, and they said, there don't seem to be any damage there, but we'll know more in like 12 days, 14 days.
Well, hasn't he been avoiding Tommy John surgery for a while now?
Well, that's Tanaka, and he's been avoiding that for like 3
Oh, wow. They are really beat up then.
Yeah.
Tanaka seems to be questionable all the time, and I just confused the two. Wow. Is there any talk about Gio Gonzalez being signed? I know he's out there, and I saw him for a lot of years with Oakland and Washington, and I think he's a pretty solid guy. Have you heard about that?
Well, right now, Brian Cashman is talking, they're going to stick with Lazaga, and Sessa, and Herman. But, there's a concern because, Severino started to struggle in July of last year, and it doesn't hurt his velocity, but it hurts his control, and maybe that explains his second half struggles. And then, you have him, you have Tanaka, now you have CeCe. CeCe's going to start the year on the, disabled list, and he got suspended for 5 games. So, we might not see these guys till late April. And, even if they pick up any free agent pitchers now, they're not working out or anything. Last year the free agents were working out in Bradenton. They were playing teams from Japan. So now if they even get these free agents, they might not be ready for, another month or so.
I would assume these guys are throwing and keeping in pretty good shape.
Well, I imagine, that they are throwing and keeping in shape, but, pitching the batters and everything, that's going to take at least.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that could take anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, so, we'll have to see.
Okay. What would you predict is going to happen?
Well, we don't know about Severino. I think they'll stick with Herman and Lazaga, and, they'll because it's early in the season, they start too early, in my opinion, and, you'll have a lot of rain outs and maybe snow outs and stuff, so maybe for the first month, you can get by with maybe 4 pitchers, but then, you get later in the season, you play every day, they're definitely going to have to get another pitcher sometime.
What gets me, they pitchers and catchers report about 2 days, 3 days later, position players report, and within the week, they're playing spring training games.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy. When I first come down, they had 6 days of pitchers and catchers, and they had 6 days of regular squads. And I remember Joe Torre used to have 2 inter-squad games. Now these guys come in on a Tuesday. They worked out Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Saturday they're playing games.
Now, I think this is all for money, boost up the attendance in these leagues, in spring training leagues. And now that we see what a business it is, was an average seat $35-40 for spring training?
Well, for the Yankees, Ralph, it starts out at 27. But I will tell you, there's a good share of empty seats at the games. And if you go to the secondary market, after the first pitch is thrown, you can get in for $10, $15. But and it's basically an older crowd. I mean, it's not spring break yet, but most of the people you see, they're in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. So baseball better be careful because they're going to start pricing themselves out.
For sure. I'll ask you about the infield, Tulowitzki. Now, that's the guy that we talked about last week, who I think could be the steal of the off season.
Well, I think so too. I mean, if he gets back to like 80% of the player he used to be, I mean, he was a great player. He's an all-star. And, he's going to play I believe 5 times a week. So he's not going to play every game. But if he can stay healthy, he's an outstanding player.
Okay. I got to ask you that we've been talking about him all off season. Have there been any word about Ellsbury?
Well, Ellsbury is going to come into camp on the 16th or 17th. So he'll be in next weekend, and then the Yankees are going to start evaluating what they have there. Hopefully, he can recover, and maybe sometime in mid-April he could come up and help the team because it'd be a good addition if he could get healthy again. But I think if he stays hurt. We were talking last week, like you mentioned, I think he just might retire.
Okay. How about the Bird-Luca fight at first base? Not Luca. What's his name?
Voit. Yeah, Luke Voit. Well, Brian Cashman said either one's going to make the team and the other one's going to go back to the minors. So they're not going to platoon them. And right now they're running equal. Nobody seems to have the advantage. They're both playing really well. So, we'll have to see how that plays out.
Okay. Would you think that the job, if they were head and tail, couldn't separate the two, you think the job would go to Bird? Yeah,
I think so because the Yankees really see something in that bat. I mean, if he could stay healthy and look like the hitter he possibly could be from a few years ago, I mean, they could have
that was a dramatic drop-off, and I don't think injuries were to blame unless we come to find out that there was some sort of cover-up. I don't remember hearing about injuries.
Well, I think last year, he might have been injured and still been playing because, they'll come out and say, oh, everything's all right, but there's a good possibility he could have been hurt or he just got too pool happy. But I think they like that bat in the lineup with that, that short porch and right, even though Voit has a lot of power, and he looks pretty good defensively, too. So, he could play a big part before the year's over, just like he did last year.
All right. Key guy that needs to mature, come into his own, grow up, whatever. Guy could hit 50 home runs, Sanchez, the catcher.
Well, right now he's only played maybe 4 or 5 games. I mean, he looks good defensively, and he's hit home runs, and he's still striking out, but that seems to be the baseball way now. But hopefully they can get him straightened out defensively. So far, he looks pretty good.
Okay. Do you look for getting back to the pitching? Do you look for Cashman to make a deal?
I think sometime in the last week, there might be, if there's somebody, put on waivers or something like that, they might pick up somebody from another team and, put him in the minors. But I think eventually, they'll make a a pickup during the season because, if they got a chance to win the World Series, for the next 4 or 5 years. So, I don't think they'll spare the money if they can get somewhere. But, yes, I do think they need more pitching.
Okay. Are you still as confident as you were that this is going to be a contending team, or has the pitching really worried you?
No, I think the way it is now, you want your starters to go 5 innings. They have a great bullpen, and they'll hit so many home runs this year. They'll score a lot of runs. And another thing, Ralph, most of the teams in the American League, there's not a lot of good teams in the American League. So, I see the Yankees still winning around 100 games because there's not really a lot of good teams. There's maybe 4 or 5 good teams in the American League, even though, Tampa Bay is good.
You got the Red Sox. You've got Tampa has been terrific over the last few years. So you've got some competition in the East. Toronto.
They might have improved, but as of now, I still think they're a little too young.
Okay. Don't they have a former Hall of Famer's or a Hall of Famer's son? Vladimir Guerrero Jr. coming up. And the reason I'm bringing him up, it's not just the Yankees, not just Toronto, but there is a rule in baseball regarding when do you start the clock on a guy becoming a free agent. And I think this is going to be settled when the Player Association and management comes to a new agreement in the next few years. But teams tend to put off bringing a guy up for a couple of 3 weeks during the year. I think it's July. You have to go into July. Am I correct about that? If you don't want to get the clock running. And they're doing that with Toronto. I've seen it done before, and I think it's a rule that's bogus, and I'm wondering what you think about it.
Well, yeah, it is, because I remember last year, the Yankees weren't going to bring up Torreyes till like April 18th because they could have, if they brought him on the opening day roster, he would have lost, the Yankees would have lost a year. So. Right.
Oh, that's the date, April 18th. I thought it was July, but that's all right. You got to keep him in the minors that long, or lose him a year earlier to the free agent market, and everything starts, arbitration and what have you. So I just think it's a bogus rule.
Well, I agree with you. It is. Two things, Ralph. Getting back to Toronto, as well as Vladimir Guerrero's son, they have Dante Bichette's son, Bo Bichette, who's a heck of a prospect, and they also have Craig Biggio's son. So, so Toronto, they have the genes, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Wow, I had no idea. With those three coming up, it boosts them to being a contender. Vladimir's got rare reviews, let's put it that way, or previews, to being as good as his dad, which puts a lot of pressure on him. I was talking to George Case about that and what that entails, being the son of a ball player. Sometimes it's good, but, there are very few. Griffey is one that's an exception. Sandy Alomar is an exception. With all the players coming up that are sons of former players, Andy Van Slyke has a kid coming up, if I'm not mistaken. Very few turn out to be better than their dads.
Well, it's a tough cross to bear, and you get some of the fans who are just ruthless. I mean, look at Yogi's son Dale. He had to go through a lot of it, and it happens to a lot of players. You don't see it, happening. The son is as good as the father.
Right, no question. How does Girardi look at this? Is he positive? What's the word from him?
Girardi?
Yeah.
Well, I think
I'm sorry, not Girardi. Boone.
Boone. Well, I mean, he seems to be. He should be very confident and stuff like that. I think the Yankees they're basically run by, it seems like, analytics and stuff. So if he stays with the course, and I mean, he seems to be a player's manager, and I think he'll do a good job. I thought he did a good job last year. So I'm not too concerned about the manager. The thing that concerns me is they're too power hungry. And when you get in the playoffs against big-time pitching, it's a whole different thing. But the Yankees have been going through that since 2001. So, you need a Louis Soho, and you need guys who can Johnny Damon. You need guys who will go the opposite way once in a while instead of just swing for the fences.
Louis Soho, that's a name. Came up with the Angels. I think played a little bit in Oakland with Ricky Henderson. A good ball player. A good piece, as they say. Reminds me of Brent Gardner. A good, solid guy to have. Well,
the Yankees still have Louis around. Louis used to manage the Tampa Yankees, and now he's working with the minor leaguers. So he's down here over the Himes. Yep, Louis still down here. Miguel Cairo is down here. So, Tino helps out in spring training. So they keep, they keep these guys around because it's nothing but good knowledge.
Has Louisiana Lightning been there? Rod Guidry.
Yeah, he was here at the start of spring training because I seen him, working with the pitchers in the bullpen and stuff. So, even though they didn't renew his contract when he was pitching coach with the Yankees, he still comes down every spring, and it's always smart to listen to him because he was a terrific pitcher.
No question. Hey, let's get into a little nostalgia. You published a picture, I think it was out of an old Yankee yearbook, and it was that of Clete Boyer. And you brought back some memories for me. You put it on your Facebook page, and one of the responses was that a comment by someone that he was the best, I'm quoting this guy, best fielding third baseman in Yankee history. Now, the first thing that came to mind was Craig Nettles. Now, two different Yankee generations, if you were. One I got to see, Clete Boyer, and Nettles you got to see in your baseball fandom prime. Who do you think was the better third baseman? And I had the case, you could arguably make the case that either of those two, my choice is Boyer, could be as good as anybody that ever lived at third base. I thought he would, if one could be underrated, only because he played precisely at the time that Brooks Robinson was playing. What do you think? Let's take those three: Clete Boyer, Brooks Robinson, and Greg Nettles.
Well,
obviously,
the thing
offensively, Clete's third, but defensively, is there a case to be made where he's better than those other guys?
Well, to be fair, Ralph, like I've mentioned, I only seen Clete starting in '64. So, I seen him towards the tail end of the Yankees, the dynasty, and then they went south of the border. But I'd have, to pick Nettles because I seen Nettles play more. And, not only being a terrific, defensive third baseman, Nettles had a lot of power. So I'd have to go with Nettles because, I really haven't seen I didn't see Clete in his prime. And, Brooks Robinson was just fantastic because, he did it in the World Series and stuff. So if I had to pick a Yankee, I'd pick Nettles.
New York was blessed with a number of great third basemen. One of them was Billy Cox, who came along and went right before my prime time of watching him. I was a real little kid when Billy Cox played third base. There are some that say he's the best of the group defensively. That's sometimes it's just so subjective. I wish that there was a better stat to measure a defensive player's prowess. And I haven't seen one that's really outstanding. You're more familiar with New Age statistics. Is there anything that covers it better than what we used to get? Just how many total chances, how many errors? Sometimes didn't make sense because some guys, they'd make fewer errors, but they'd have fewer chances, and they'd dive for plays less often and what have you. Is there any stat that's out there today that measures defense a little better than the ones we had?
Well, the thing is, Ralph, when it comes to that, I'm an old school guy. I go by what I see and stuff. But years ago, I never heard of any of this stuff. Like when Clete Boyer was playing, and Nettles was playing, and Brooks Ross. You didn't hear a lot about all this analytical things that you have nowadays. So I'm sure they have they have stats for everything now. But back in the 60s and the 70s, and I'm not sure about the 50s. You could tell me. I never heard about any of this stuff. Either the guy caught the ball or he didn't.
That's true. What would you say is of all the new age stats, is there one that you enjoy? I'll tell you the one I enjoy, and that's on-base percentage plus the slugging, which you can measure a pitcher for that defensively, who hits what against you, how much power, and this, that, and the other thing. That's my favorite stat, and I know I'm not describing it perfectly, but it's on-base percentage, slugging percentage added together, and that makes for a great stat. Any that you particularly enjoy, or do you just ignore them and use the standard, extra base hits, this, that, and the other thing?
No, I think that's a good stat. Another one I get into a little bit is walks to hits to innings pitched. But I don't really follow all this stuff they have nowadays because it seems to complicate the game too much. And I think this was put out by people who never played the game and just try to analyze everything, and you can overanalyze it and just make it a mess.
Okay. I want to ask you about, there's a rule change they're trying in spring training. What is it, the 20-second clock rule?
Yeah. Yep.
Have they been strict with it? Are they enforcing it? And does it seem to make the game go faster?
Well, yeah, because at the Steinbrenner Field you can see the 20-second clock, and most of these guys, Ralph, in the spring, they pitch with 6 or 8 seconds left because the games don't mean as much, and the starters, you're working on things. Now during the regular season, it could be a different story. When a big situation. You're not going to rush yourself. But down here in the spring, it really hasn't made too much difference because, they pretty much get through it. the veterans are just out there trying to get their work in, so they're not really concentrating on, setting up the hitters and all that. They just want to get their pitches in.
Right. Hey, Jack, thank you for the Yankee update. It, as usual, succinct, concise, and really informative, Jack.
Well, thanks, Ralph. I mean, I really enjoy it, and hopefully we can get some guests on and, just make it a little better.
I think we'll start doing that. I was hoping to get Alan this evening. Next week we'll firm that up. And just want to thank you again for contributing. You're terrific and cooperative and right on time, as they say.
Well, thanks for everything, Ralph. And, I'm going to like 8 or 10 more Yankee games, so this is the best time of the year for me. So I'm having a great time.
Beautiful. And not only that, you get to see your Yankees come in because you're in Tampa Bay and, so to speak, St. Petersburg. And you get to watch them come in. A little bit about them. I watched them last night on a replay. They look deep. How many young players they have coming up is really incredible. I give them a lot of credit.
Well, this kid, Florial, he'll be in Double-A this year. I mean, he hit a 3-run bomb today over at Clearwater to the opposite field. And so if this kid can, learn the strike zone a little bit, he has trouble hitting the curveball, but who doesn't? If he can iron some couple things out, he could really be a terrific ball player.
Yeah. So you've got baseball all year. You're a lucky man, my friend.
Well, it's nice, too, Ralph. I mean, they have the Gulf Coast League. They have extended spring training. So if you're down here, you can see, probably over 120 games for free. You go over the minor league complex for nothing and watch these guys. So it's baseball paradise.
Well, my uncle lived in St. Pete on North Shore Drive. Do you know where that is?
I'm not familiar with it because I never look at the street signs. I go by the Indian method. I just point.
Okay. Well, when I came to visit him in St. Petersburg, I think it was 74. The Mets were the reigning National League champions, and they trained at Al Lang Miller Huggins Field in St. Pete. And I went over there. I have a great picture of both he and I under that sign of Mets were, National League champions. And I had a terrific time. Is that field still there?
Yes, the field's still there, but it's sacrilegious now. It's used by a soccer team, but the Rays own that field. And the other day, Ralph, I was at the Yankee game, and I met this guy who used to be a bat boy in St. Pete for the Yankees in the 1950s, and I'm trying to get him on the show.
Oh, wow. Oh, that would be a terrific guest. Man, how'd you meet him? Just chatting?
Well, the thing is, I met him about 3 or 4 years ago, and every year I see these people at spring training. I always ask him, how's he doing? How's he doing? So the other day I met up with him, like in the 7th inning, and we talked like nonstop for 3 innings. I mean, his dad used to sit with Casey Stengel, and he used to play pepper games with like Yogi and Whitey Ford. And I said, you got to come on the show. I mean, we could just play the tape and you could talk for as long as you want. I mean, it was some fascinating stories. So hopefully I can get him on.
Get him on. That'd be terrific. And then you can take over as the producer.
Well, the best thing to do, Ralph, is just let the guy talk because, he's telling me about Mickey Mantle and Yogi and, I remember all these guys. I didn't see them all play, but I remember them, and the stories were fascinating. And, I mean, he used to be a scout for the Cubs, and it was just, he'd be a great guest.
Hey,
we got to get him on.
Let me take a minute. We have some time. let me learn a little bit about you, Jack, and have the audience learn a little bit about you. If baseball wasn't your passion, what would be your passion?
Well, it'd probably be some other sport because that's all I ever did was play ball, and I love all sports. I love hockey, I love football, I love basketball, tennis, and that's pretty much been my passion my whole life. Either I'm playing it, or I used to go to the U.S. Open. I used to go to Ranger games, go see the Knicks. I'd be a Jet season ticket holder because I couldn't get the Giant tickets. So that's what that's what I love to do, and that's all I talk about anyway. So this is a piece of cake.
Beautiful. No decision to be made. It's sports either way, and you are a die-hard Yankee fan, and I love the passion, so keep it up. We'll talk next week. Jack Degraw's Yankees. I'm Ralph Tycho of the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, and thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll be back soon. Bye, Jack.
Have a good night. Bye-bye now.
The proceeding was a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production. Thank you for listening.